Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night, March 16th in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. The satellite imagery from today on Thursday was stunning, and I just want to show you a couple of things I was watching. First of all, we had this freeze event that got into the southeast, and you can actually see the reflection of that in the satellite data as you look just offshore. So you notice there's this large area of clearing that's along the east coast and all around the Gulf Coast. What's going on here is you end up getting this really cold air sweeping out over the ocean, and it clears out the region right next to it before these little cloud streets begin to form, and we can see the evidence of that. Elsewhere on this animation, yes, there's a large storm system, of course, that ripped through the midsection of the United States, but before we talk more about that, I want to look at the snow on the backside. So we can see where we do have decent snowpack through Montana, the northern plains. It's still under some cloud cover here in parts of Minnesota, but there was snow that was added today right into this area. But take a look out west. So as we just kind of get this closer to this evening, you can see the snow in the Sierra Nevada. Some places here in the central and southern parts of the Sierra Nevada mountains are at record levels right now with snow. You can see the snow partly here in the upper Colorado Basin, but look into parts of Wyoming, into Utah, into this part of Nevada. Look at this into the Snake River Valley as well. And there's still good snow that is in parts of Oregon, in parts of Montana. This has been just one of those years where there's been just a tremendous amount of snowpack. So before we talk more about these storms down here, I do want to show you that. This is what I've got through this morning on the 16th, because I'm recording this in the evening on the 16th, in terms of accumulated snowfall departure. And I just want to point out here, we just kind of take a look at the west right here. This is some places here 200 plus inches of snow compared to average. The upper Colorado Basin, about 130% of normal snowpack here. The snows throughout the west honestly are really good, even though there's a few pockets in parts of the Pacific Northwest, the Northern Rockies that are below. We could step back and see that this is a year that really just packed the mountains up. We've also had heavy snows in through here, this whole region of the upper Midwest, while a lot of us, in the southern and eastern parts of the Corn Belt here just have not seen much snow. And this is a part of the map that changed a lot just in the last few days with the heavy snows that came into the Hudson Valley here. But we could still see that along the spine of the Appalachian Mountains, well below average on snowpack. But what we need to do with this is take a look at where the snow water is right now. So I'm going to show you two maps. This one is this year. This is through the 16th, looking at snow water equivalent. Now, the amounts that are in the Sierra Nevada here go off the chart. All right, so there are some places here that have over 100 inches of liquid in the snow. And we've got just great snowpack through the Cascades and throughout the Rocky Mountains, including the upper Colorado Basin. But I want you to see, this area right in through here, because through parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, there is a stretch in through here that has, in some places, up to 10 inches of liquid in that snow. And that's all on the headwaters of the Mississippi River. We can now see, and again, this was from a recent event, though, parts of southern Ontario into Quebec, and then getting here into parts of New England, we've got a lot of water in that snow as well. So we just think about this at this time of year in terms of the flooding threat when this begins to melt. We also think about it in terms of what it could do to recharge the soil moisture that's underneath this, an ongoing kind of story that we've been having. But the second map I want to show you is what it looked like last year. So this is a year ago. So this year and a year ago. Now, you automatically see the dramatic changes that are across the northern tier of the U.S. But look west. I want you to see west, because this is this year versus last year. I think that dramatic change is going to mean a lot for the western United States as we go forward. Okay, so let's come back now to the storm systems we were watching this evening. I'm going to zoom in on Texas. Let me take you back to where these storms really began to pop. And we had some very deep convection here. And it was kind of an interesting setup. Can you actually see the two main fronts? This right here was the cold front sagging to the south. And right here, this boundary is where the dry line was. So we had storms out ahead of it, storms on the dry line, and some of these storms went right over the top of like Dallas-Fort Worth. They stretched clear down here into south central Texas. Some of them huge overshooting tops, which suggest very, very strong updrafts. Now, I'm recording this at about 11 o'clock in the evening here on Thursday. And so this is the total number of storm reports we'd had up to that point, but we can see some of these were just some big hailers. And I was looking here at some of these hail sizes, a lot of 2-inch, 2.5-inch, some of these approaching 3 to 4-inch hailstones, just huge stones out of this. And a lot of damage is going to be shown up in the reports tomorrow when we get a better look at how much damage was had this night. The storms right now, I just want to show you on lightning. I love to look at this. This website's called blitzertongue.org. I've shown it to you thousands of times, it feels like, over the years. But we're just watching these storms very actively move through eastern parts of Texas. There is a tornado watch out for this area as these move farther to the east. This is into Arkansas and Louisiana, and just quite a bit of lightning in these storms. Okay, I'm going to come back to the near-term forecast at the end of this video because I've kind of got some important things I want to share with you about the updated long-range forecast. So we're going to pick up with where we've been kind of going for the last few weeks, and that is really the last month and a half, and that is the fast fade of this La Nina. Okay, so current ocean temperatures, again, the story we've been sharing in the reports is we do have this negative PDO signal, but the La Nina is done. And the likelihood of some sort of resurgence with this is very, very low. And there's a lot of evidence for that. Mainly it's in trade wind behavior. Now, what I want you to see is, and I put this in this morning's report on Thursday, is the latest forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia. Now, we watched the Bureau of Meteorology's forecast for El Nino and La Nina carefully, and the primary reason for that is, like I said in the past, they're on the receiving end of that particular teleconnection, okay? What I mean by that is when there's an El Nino, there's major risk of Australia being very dry. When there's La Nina, there tends to be a lot of rainfall. They're right at the end of where the trade winds really influence the MJO. It's all one connected system. So what am I trying to get to here? You can see that their latest forecast, which was just updated 2 days ago, shows that possibly by August, they are very aggressively calling for temperatures to be 2 degrees C above normal. And just for some perspective on this, I mean, this is bordering on not just a strong El Nino event, but you get up much warmer than this, and we're talking about what we often refer to as super Nino events. Now, they have a lot of reasons for why they've put us on El Nino watch and why they're so aggressive with this. But compared to other global models, I'm just going to skip ahead from April all the way to August. And you can see that every single forecasting agency, this would be, of course, the Australians, the Canadians, the Europeans, the Japanese, the French, the United States, and the British, we're all into El Nino. But notice that the Bureau of Meteorology is almost twice as strong as any other at this point. So we need to just be watching this whole thing very carefully. Now, I told you there's this connection between the El Nino, La Nina behavior and the MJO. And one of the first clues that this La Nina had let go and that we're moving in this direction was when the MJO finally popped out over into phases 7-8. That's the Western Pacific. And is currently sitting right here way far out in the Western Pacific, trying to actually move its way into the Atlantic, it looks like, but it's expected to collapse back into null space over the next, 7 to 10 days. Now, there's some thought that it's going to pop back out into phases, 6 or 7, or maybe back out into phase 8. But we would now just say that when we look at these historical teleconnections, there's no reason to look at the La Nina versions of them. And this is what I mean. I love this website. It's Italian. They did a phenomenal job kind of recreating these historical correlation maps, composite maps. But if you notice, MJO phases 7 and 8, look at the nada, that means no El Nino, no La Nina. And the green in through here means that it's very common for this time of year when there is not a La Nina and not yet an El Nino to be in phases 7 and 8. All right. In fact, when we look at this MJO movement, this time of year is often it's often moving a lot, and that's why spring is such a volatile month. But if we just make the assumption that by early April, we're going to go back into phase 7, so we're going to spend most of the rest of this month in 8-1 null space, then pop back out into phase 7, we end up getting this as a forecast. All right. And what it's suggesting is something where the jet stream might follow some sort of path like this. Now, what's got me concerned about this, should we go over into MJO phase 7, I actually need to take you back right here to the sea surface temperatures, because I know we look a lot in the Pacific. Look how warm things are in the Gulf of Mexico right now. That was all compliments to that big subtropical ridge we talked about in January, February, and early March. Very warm ocean temperatures right here. So what I'm concerned about is, given there's already a lot of warmth in this area down in the Gulf, if the jet stream goes back into this configuration in April, this is a setup to really just light up the southern United States with severe weather, possibly through the Mid-South into the Midwest as well. And that's a major concern I've got. The problem with this pattern is it would likely keep the Pacific Northwest colder into April. They need to break away and start getting some heat units fast there, and this pattern is not conducive to that. But it is one certainly where this temperature pattern we're in now, where there's a lot of cold air, looks like it could end pretty quickly into the month of April. So we need to have a discussion about that, because right now, the current forecast for the month of April, this is brand new, just released tonight by the ECMWF, is not showing that. But the only warm place it's got for the country is in Texas and Oklahoma. It's really trying to keep this persistent cold bias in the west, and there's probably a snow feedback here, but a lot of cooler air through the Canadian prairie all the way over toward the Appalachian Mountains. Now, it doesn't mean every day is cold, of course. We know this is a 30-day average. It's just saying more cooler days than warmer days. But we have to call this into question a bit, because if the MJO does make that move, and and that's the most dominant teleconnection, I think we might be just too cold biased here for the month of April. And there's some new supporting evidence that was released just after I finished my morning report today. It's the new April outlook from the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center. And I look at this, and it actually makes a bit more sense to me. I mean, remember what I showed you, the cooler air here and that trough with the flow making the turn? What that tends to do is open up the Gulf, and that's why I would be concerned for this whole region for having severe storms going into the month of April. Could be a very active April. The drier signal here would honestly be welcomed. I was amazed being in Tucson for so long how much rain there was down there. The desert is green. It's beautiful. I want to go back, but just amazing to see that. But this could suggest at some point, once we get through the end of March, a pretty quick turn, and a lot of folks going quickly to get a crop established. It'll be doing this possibly in between the severe weather events. Now from here, I want to flip you over to the new drought outlook, and I'm going to look at the seasonal drought outlook. And what is interesting about this pattern is we are now starting to see some evidence of maybe some drought redevelopment happening between now and the end of June in the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to show you why in a few seconds. But improvement in the northern plains, persistence in the southern. And that's just the newest outlook, looking out their longer range. Now, the CPC did also update their 3-month outlook. Let's have a look at it here. Excuse me. This would be April, May, and June. More than likely, the cooler anomalies here and here are partly driven by snowpack that's currently in the ground and what we think could be more troughing across the north interior of the United States. In other words, maybe a jet stream pattern that's got a little bit of a flavor like this to it. Okay. But certainly a resurgence of warmer conditions being forecast by the Climate Prediction Center. As they have been for a while, they're trying to keep this whole sector in through here quite active with a lot of spring rainfall. This has been the tight spring planting windows we've been talking about for a few months. Just want to make a point here that it is still showing up in the forecasts, and we just need to be on the lookout for this. What I don't like is just the continued worry about the drought situation that is in the southern plains. And just to show you this updated this morning, this is the newest drought monitor we've got for the United States. This is where it's just been anchored for so long. And we got a lot of snowpack on the northern part of this, but still very much anchored here. Where have we seen the drought area been majorly reduced is through this region and, of course, in California. Just to remind you, back in December, this area was in D4 drought, and now it's completely been removed from the drought monitor. We still see drier conditions in central Oregon, and there's also here in the northern part of Montana drier conditions outside of what we've been talking about here. But this new longer range forecast suggests, take a look here. This was the temperature side of it. Let's flip this over to precipitation, 30-day, there it is. That this whole area in through here could see quite active precipitation during the month of April. Good news is the models are finally trying to back off on that really, really strong onshore flow that's been around for so long into California. We start to see that really starting to just move away in the near term. So I'm concerned about the severe weather, the tight planting windows, early planting windows here in this whole region. Okay, let's now go look at a new long-range forecast released by the IRI multi-model probability forecast system. This is out of Columbia University. And I put this in this morning's report, but I would like to go here and go to North America. And let's look at that April, May, June outlook. And I made a statement this morning. I said, look, the models are not giving us strong signals. This could partly be due to large spread because we're in INSO-neutral conditions, no massive climate driver, pushing things along at this point. Or it could be that there's I mean, there's a possibility that might just be normal April, May, June precipitation pattern. What I need you to know is a year ago, this is what the model had been forecasting. And we know that last year this was spot on. Well, pretty darn close. We watched drought develop in the western Corn Belt, the southern plains. Remember how wet things were in the northern plains last spring? And also in the Pacific Northwest, it was quite cold in this area. So that verified. But remember, we had folks in Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas that were trying to pre-irrigate their fields before planting. So what I'm trying to show you is that the current forecast showing this, that's a really important signal, even though it looks like there's a lack of a signal. I do want to point out, though, that the model is forecasting above average temperatures for much of the eastern half of the country once we get into April, May, and June. So we could get a really quick accumulation of heat despite the next 15 days or so being quite chilly throughout much of the United States. So we need to be ready for this pattern to kind of switch on a dime once we get truly into the spring months of April, May, and June. From here, I want to show you one last long-range outlook, and it's going to come from the Climate Prediction Center's their official forecast system. And I want to take you all the way out there to July, August, September, and I want to look at their temperature forecast first. What we notice is, once again, they've got the warmest conditions from Texas to Utah, so from the southern plains to the Great Basin area, near normal temperatures across the northern tier of the country. But what is interesting about this pattern is I think what their model's picking up on in terms of precipitation, again, is a kind of a two high pressure cells, one here over the Bermuda High region and another one likely setting up somewhere here over the Pacific Northwest. This is an area that's really increasingly becoming a concern to me. So why we see such wet conditions east of the Mississippi River is mainly because this would tend to trap some sort of stationary front right in through this area that storms would come off of and move east. What I think is very important about this forecast is right now in the southern plains where there's been so much drought concern, the model's no longer forecasting high probability of drought in this area, unlike a year ago. But I don't like this signal here in the Pacific Northwest. So I just wanted to bring up to speed. This will be kind of the last updates we have from the new long-range models. They typically come out in the first 15, 16 days of the month. And so we've now got that new picture. So we'll continue to refine that as we go forward. All right, let's pick up now with what we've got from our all hazards weather map. And as we kind of get this newest update, we still have the winter storm warnings here, winter storm advisories, winter storm watches, very strong winds to the southern side of this. Here's our tornado watch that we talked about a few moments ago, plus several severe thunderstorm warnings with the current system rolling through. And if we just take a look at where the severe storm potential could be on Friday, we're going to watch the Gulf Coast pretty carefully. In addition to that, there is still some more snow that will accumulate around Lake Superior and also into lower Michigan with this system as it continues to exit into Ontario. But do expect more snow happening right here in the Colorado Rockies down into New Mexico over the next day and a half as well. So to see that, let's just pick up 6 a.m. on Friday morning with the high-res NAM. So we can see very strong winds, snow in Ontario over Lake Superior, then coming off of Lake Michigan. Still some snow showers on the backside in the northern plains in the morning. Keep an eye on the snow that's right down here, though. While all that's going on, the frontal squall line we watched go through eastern Texas tonight on Thursday is now pushing over Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. And this front attempts to clear the Appalachian Mountains by the time we get into Friday afternoon and evening. This brings in rain into the Carolinas, still more strong storms into Georgia, parts of Alabama and Florida. And that system exits east on Saturday. And the high pressure that comes in behind it brings in some really cold air. Notice how far to the south, down here over the Rio Grande, we might be able to get some snow out of this. So there could be some lake effect. We know the Great Lakes are ice-free right now for the most part, and therefore that colder air could help create some lake effect or even some lake-enhanced snow as we work our way into Sunday early morning. But it's this high pressure cell that's really bringing in the colder air. Now, before I dig into the GFS versus the European model comparison, I would like to show you a couple things going on with this jet stream pattern. We are watching the jet shift back north and retract a bit, but I don't see any major blocking coming up with this. But an important change that's happening with this retraction means the likelihood of seeing another big atmospheric river event slamming into California. Look at this. We'll just play this all the way out here, getting out here past the 20th, the 21st. There could be more heavy precip for the Baja of California, Southern California, getting into Arizona, New Mexico, in fact, the whole Four Corners states. But what's important is, we're no longer seeing these events race up into the central part of California like they had been, and this is nowhere near as strong as the ones we'd been watching. So what we need to pay attention to is the whole of the jet stream and what it's going to be doing to this precipitation pattern. So let's just get an idea about it here and look at these next 2 weeks. So this is the 12Z European model on Thursday, looking at precipitation anomalies over the next 15 days. And again, we do see systems coming through, enhancing the rain shadow over Texas, but then blowing up and running off through the Mid-South and Midwest following that. It's drier in the Pacific Northwest. It's a bit drier here in the Canadian Prairie. Not dry, but drier, especially when you factor in what's going to be happening over week 2. But still, more precip coming into California, into the Four Corners states in the models. And the reason for that is the jet stream behavior. So let's take a look at where the jet stream is going to possibly have some split action to it and what we get as a result of that. So I'm just playing here through, next week. I'm taking this all the way out there. Let's just stop at day 10. This would be the 26th. So here's your jet retraction. There's a bit of split in the flow, but this subtropical branch is active. Now what's important about that is that you see this? This is what we typically get when there is an El Nino. Big, strong subtropical pull on the jet stream coming from Hawaii all the way across the southern tier of the United States. And if that does set up, I think that the models might be biased a bit too dry into the southern plains, especially into Texas. But the flow is still splitting here, not here. And I think that's important to understand who's going to be getting the moisture and who's going to be seeing the changes in temperature. So let's go have a look at it. This is the next 7 days by the latest update from the Weather Prediction Center. And unfortunately, you can see that the next 7 days, they've gone drier into this area and drier through the Canadian Prairie. There is still better moisture coming into the Pacific Northwest and more moisture coming into California, just not at the same magnitude we've been seeing. That's what I tried to illustrate there. But we will see multiple chances for strong to severe storms throughout the Mid-South and, this side of Texas, getting over to the lower Mississippi Basin. But in terms of snow, I think we're going to really limit that to possibly North Dakota, but mostly northern Minnesota, UP, northern Wisconsin, Ontario, Quebec, that whole corridor. A lot of mild air going to try to push in at some point the next few times these systems roll through. Okay, so here we are. This is the comparison between the GFS on the left and the European on the right, and we've already seen through the weekend when the high pressure comes diving in here on Sunday. So there it is. Now, that high pressure brings in a frost threat, but then you notice already by Monday, both models are bringing in another coastal low into the west coast, and it's going to be able to spread precip all along the west coast, and then it will likely set up over the Four Corners states with more snow getting into Tuesday. You can still see through Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. Let's just rock back and forth there again. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. A lot more precipitation coming into the west. But by next Wednesday, I'm going to be watching for this system to eject into the plains. And what I'll be concerned about next Wednesday night and Thursday is, again, a quarter in through here that could have strong to severe storms. See the high pressure cell there feeding it with more snow along the northern tier. And you can see it in both models here. This is next Thursday morning. As we then play forward, you can see there could possibly be a 2-day strong to severe thunderstorm event that stretches all the way from eastern Texas up into the Ohio River Valley. That is in both models right now. And as we play this out there past that time frame, that system could pull farther to the east, delivering snow pretty far into the interior of New England, according to the European model, much farther to the north than the GFS. But there's still quite a bit of moisture, I think, that could make it over the Appalachian Mountains by Friday the 24th and get into the Carolinas and in the southeast. Both models also on that same day bring in another low here, which is more moisture coming into Northern California, into the Pacific Northwest. So let's distill that down into a couple of maps. The first one here, next 10 days, probability of getting at least an inch of liquid. I love these maps. There's so much great information in this. Next 10 days, probability of getting at least an inch. So these windows stay tight. But you can see how much moisture is still coming over the eastern central Corn Belt Great Lakes states. Look at the moisture that'll be falling as snow in parts of the Four Corner states. And there's still more moisture coming into the whole of the West Coast with this particular pattern. On the snow side of it, this map shows the probability in the next 10 days of getting another 6 inches of snow. So like we said, it's mostly Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, UP, Michigan, Ontario, into Quebec. And then, of course, throughout the West where the cold stays anchored. From here, I just want to look again at the week 2 pattern. So you notice the precip anomalies shift a bit farther to the north, and this whole region stays active. And that's also echoed in the latest update from the GFS. See it? Okay, last couple things here. Temperatures. As we've been talking about, there's this cold shot coming through on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we can see in gray here everywhere that we expect to have a low temperature that is at or below freezing. So this is a frost potential map. It gets pretty far into the south here. From there, I want to show you what the low temperatures are forecast to look like. So here's Friday morning's lows. Getting into Saturday, very cold air in through this area. Here's that frost line. From Saturday into Sunday, there it is. Bitterly cold air in the northern plains. As we then go from Sunday into Monday, advances even farther to the south, clipping parts of Louisiana now, getting pretty far south into the southeast here. And then as we go into the early part of next week on Tuesday and Wednesday, there's moderation in the pattern. Now, we've been trying to keep a close eye on what the temperatures are expected to do once we get into the last week of March. And I want to show you something interesting. This is 5-day chunks of temperatures from the GFS ensemble. So yeah, next 5 days cold. But look at day 5 through 10. In fact, let's just blow this up. What we notice here is that the latest GFS went over mild in this area while keeping the cold anchored to the west. Also very cold here, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, but then also parts of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta as well. And the GFS, compared to the European, has a little bit different solution. Here's a 5-day sliding window of temperature anomalies. If I take you out there to day 5 through 10, which is here, that's the forecast from the European, and here's the same forecast from the GFS. You notice there's just a little bit more mild air in the GFS comparatively, but you can't argue that the patterns aren't the same. What the GFS does not do, in fact, let me just show it to you. Go back here. This is now day 10 through 15. It looks very similar, doesn't it? The European is not on board with that. If we just slide this out there to day 10 through 15, the European is attempting to bring in more cooler air. So we need to see how amplified this pattern is, and if we do in fact get into MJO phase 7 in time to recover some warmth across the eastern half of the country. We're going to have to watch for that particular change in a big way. Okay, just 2 more things to tell you about. Next one is in South America. Really no change to the narrative here overall. The drier conditions we're seeing here in eastern Brazil, down into like Sao Paulo and Paraná and Santa Catarina, even northern Rio Grande do Sul, this is very important for harvest because they're way behind in this area. But Mato Grosso do Sul is still quite wet, and Mato Grosso is wet. And a lot of this rain is coming on top of a newly planted safrinha crop. Big time drink for that crop right there. But quite importantly, look at the rains returning to Argentina. The shift overall in the MJO has finally allowed for some fronts to slide through here, backing off on the extreme temperatures and also bringing better chances of more widely scattered showers and storms. So that's an important change there. Lastly, I started off today talking about Australia. This is their forecast for fall, April, May, and June. And it shows that the chance of exceeding median rainfall is very, very low across most of Australia. And what's concerning here is that this is the time when they're planting their winter crops, in which they do a lot of winter crops in Australia. So to see that their long-range outlook is showing very dry means that some of this crop may go into less than ideal conditions, and they're quite concerned about it. So we need to keep a close eye on it. Okay, first of all, I want to thank my colleagues Andrew Pritchard and Matt Reardon for filling in for me while I had this busy travel schedule this last week. It's great to just know I can rely on absolutely brilliant scientists to help fill in the narrative while I'm out. And secondly, we've got quite a few things to be on the lookout for here, but I just want to make a point that as we do this seasonal transition into spring and the atmosphere gets ready to overturn, I just want to let you know my risk factor for severe weather in the southeast, the south, the mid-south, and the Midwest, it's a bit elevated over where it normally is. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'll report back to you again soon. Appreciate it. Thank you.